Hey, what's up? Tristan from Huge Menace here. Today we're going to be creating a Sci-Fi crate, as well as giving a broad overview of the ND Addon. So let's take a look at what we'll be creating and jump into it. Alright, so before we get started, I'm just going to run through my Blender setup. So if you'd like to follow along exactly, you can. First off, in terms of add-ons, we're going to be using a couple of them. The first one we want to make sure to have enabled, if you don't already, is the 3D viewport pie menus. The other one is the modifier tools, and both of these just come with Blender, just don't think they're enabled by default. And then last but not least, probably the most important one is ND. So ND is just a free non-destructive toolkit that we've created. So you can grab a copy of it from Gumroad or the Blender Marketplace. Both of the links are down in the description. In terms of setup or settings for the add-on itself, I'm using basically everything out of the box as it comes. So fast booleans, 30 degrees for the bevel and smoothing operations, mouse values, lock overlay pinning, and then the key map again is just default out of the box. So if you've got that set up the same way, you should have no problems following along exactly. Now, add-ons aside, the only other important bit of setup you want to do is under your scene properties, just make sure that your unit system is set to metric, that the unit scale is exactly 1, and that the length is set to millimeters. And with all that in place, we should be good to go. All right, to start out with, I want to create the base shape of our crate, and I want to do that by placing a plane into the scene. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that in Blender. You can hit Shift A, open up the Add Object menu, and go under Mesh Plane. However, I'm going to use the Fast Predict menu that comes with ND for a lot of this tutorial. So I'm going to simply hit F on the keyboard to bring up the Fast Predict menu and select Add Plane. Now this is already set to the correct size, but if you don't have it set, you just want to make sure you have 400 millimeters locked in there. And with that in place, the next thing I want to do is extrude this into sort of a 3D shape. Now I'm going to do that by using the Solidify Modifier. Now you can bring that up via the main menu, Shift 2, Extrusion Solidify, or again, the Fast Predict menu, hit F and then select Solidify. Now, I want this to be 500 mils thick, so I'm going to go 500 and hit enter. Awesome. With that done, I'm going to add some small details to this shape. The first thing I want to do is add a large chamfer to these 4 edges. So to do that, we're going to jump into edit mode with tab and then go into vertex select mode by clicking 1 on the keyboard. And I'm going to toggle X-ray mode on by hitting Alt-Z and just make sure that I definitely have all 4 vertices here selected. And with those vertices selected, I'm going to hit F again and select Vertex Bevel. Now, in terms of width here, I want this to be about 80. So I'm going to type in 80 and then hit Enter to confirm that. And now the last detail I want to do while I'm in edit mode is to add a smaller chamfer to this top edge and a similar one to the bottom. So with those 4 vertices still selected, I'm going to go into Edge Select mode by hitting 2. And then I'm going to bring up the Fast Predict menu and this time select Edge Bevel. Now, if we move the mouse around, we can see by adjusting this weight, we add a chamfer to the top and bottom there. Now, I want the weight to be 1, so I'm going to type in 1. And then I'm going to hit Control and Alt, basically hold them down and set the overall width to 20 millimeters. And that'll give the result that I want. Cool, that looks great. So with that in place, I'm just going to hit Enter to confirm. So I'm just going to tab back into object mode, and this is what we have so far. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to basically create some outer panels on the shape. Now, the easiest way we can do that is simply by duplicating this shape. So I'm going to select that, hit Shift D, and then this will start translating. I don't want it to move anyway, so I'm just going to right click to reset the transform, but it still creates the duplicate mesh for you there. It's just sitting directly on top of the original. Now, with that selected, I'm just going to go to the top view here. I'm going to jump into edit mode, go to vertex select mode, make sure I have these 4 vertices selected. I'm also going to turn on X-ray mode again, and then hit S to scale and just bring this out slightly. Now, in terms of the overall scale, I just want it so that this gap between the 2 is about the same width as these shadowed areas. And then these chamfered corners here, I want to make these line up a little bit better. So with the 4 vertices still selected, I'm going to hit F and then reselect Vertex Bevel to recall that. I'm just going to hold down Shift and just move the mouse until these roughly look correct. And something like that looks good to me. So I just want these 2 edges to sort of nicely line up. Awesome. With that done, I think we're complete in edit mode. So I'm going to hit Tab to go back into object mode and then just turn off X-ray mode. Now I want to resize this duplicate shape. So I want to hit F and then recall the Solidify modifier. And let's just set this to maybe 460 millimeters. So it's just slightly shorter than the original that we duplicated it from. So that kind of gives the illusion of almost like a plate sitting at the top and sitting at the bottom here. Cool. The next thing I want to do is sort of do a cutout right through the center. So I want to go into the right-hand view, make sure I have nothing selected, tap F and add in a new plane. And with the add plane dialog still open, I want to change my alignment from world to view. So the plane is looking directly at us. And I'm just going to hit S to scale and bring this down to roughly the size here. I'm going to hit S to scale again, this time constrain myself to the Y-axis by tapping Y and just bring this out so it goes past the edges on either side. So you should have something that looks like this. Now to avoid any weird behavior, I'm going to hit Control A and just make sure I apply the rotation and scale. Then I'm going to hit F and run another Solidify and bring this all the way out again so it goes past the edges on either side. Now with this object still selected, I'm going to shift click on this outer panel and then hit F, and I want to choose the difference Boolean from the menu here. And as you can see, that creates this effect over here. Cool, so we're done with this object here. So with it still selected, I'm just going to tap H to hide it. So we're just left with this result. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to cut out some details, some further details on this panel. So I'm going to go back to the right view, make sure I have nothing selected again, hit F, add a new plane, set the alignment from world to view so it's looking at us. And then I'm going to hit S to scale and bring this down to roughly about here. I'm going to scale it again, this time only along the Z axis. So I'll hit Z to constrain myself there and scale this up to about this size over here. Now again, to avoid any weird behavior, we're going to just apply the rotation and scale. Now the next thing I want to do is do a vertex bevel on the 4 corners, but you will notice that this plane is sitting directly in the center of our object. So if we go into edit mode, it looks like it disappears. It's still sitting there, it's just you can't see it. But just ensuring that we have these 4 vertices selected, I'm going to hit F, bring up Vertex Bevel, and then hit W on the keyboard to enter enhanced wireframe mode. So that'll give us a slightly better view of what's going on. And I'm just going to move my mouse and bring these 4 corners in to roughly about here. And then we'll just click to confirm that, and then hit Tab to jump out of edit mode and back into object mode. And you can see there's that resulting plane in the background there. With that still selected, I'm going to hit F to solidify that and bring this all the way out. Now with that still selected, I'm going to shift click on this panel again, hit F and choose to do another difference Boolean cut. Awesome. So that's the first side done. Now I want to basically duplicate this on the other side. So with this reference object still selected, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it. And again, just right click to reset the transform. With it still selected, I'm going to hit R to begin rotating, hit Z to just constrain myself to the Z axis and type in 90 for 90 degrees. Then I'm going to shift click on the panel again and go F, difference. Now, if you look closely, there's a bit of a weird behavior going on here. So if you look at these faces here, you can see they're still intact. However, on this side here, they look like they've disappeared. Now, this is just a result of sometimes the way the Boolean modifier in Blender works. And really what's happening is just we need to set the solver mode to exact. So the way we can do that is I'm going to just select this outer panel, hit F, and then choose this cycle operator. I'm just going to scroll up until I get this first reference object, hit F to freeze it. Keep scrolling again until I get to the second one, hit F to freeze that. I'm just going to click to confirm so they are both selected. I'm then going to hit F and select swap solver. And you can see they're currently both set to fast. So I'm going to tap S to change this to exact. Now, if you take a look when I do that, if I tap sort of toggling between fast and exact, you can see how exact brings those faces back in. Now that's the result we're after. So with that in place, I'm just going to click to confirm, and that looks much better to me now. Now I want to do one last thing on this right-hand side. I want the cut to go all the way through the bottom side of this panel. So I'm going to select this utility object. I'm going to tab into edit mode, turn on X-ray so I can see these vertices and just select the bottom two. I'm then going to double tap G to sort of slide these vertices along that edge. Now, it won't go past the bottom by default, but if we hold down the Alt key, it'll extend those rails, and then we can pull this all the way down and then click to confirm. Cool. We'll turn off X-ray mode and jump back into object mode. And you can see that was the result there. Cool. So I think we're done with these two. I'm just going to select the other one and just tap H to hide both of those. And here is what we have so far. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add some additional details on the front and back sides and then the left and right hand side. So let's start with the right hand side to begin with. So again, with nothing selected, I'm going to hit F, choose add plane, go to the alignment, set this to view, and then just scale this down to about this big here. So I want a little bit of a gap between the edge here and the edge of the plane. I'm just going to hit G to move this, hit Z to constrain myself to the Z axis, and then I want to bring this down so that the bottom of the plane is almost touching the bottom of the crate here, but not quite. Awesome. Again, just to stop anything weird happening, just hit Control A and apply the rotation and the scale. And then I'm going to jump into edit mode, hit Alt Z to go in X-ray mode. Make sure I'm selecting just these top two vertices. I'm going to double tap G, hold down Alt, and then just bring this up, just sort of roughly past the halfway point. Then click to confirm. And then I want to hit F and create another Vertex Bevel and roughly set it to, what is that? Let's say 65. Looks good. Cool. Now I'm just going to jump out of X-ray mode and jump back into object mode. Now you can see we have our plane selected in the back there. I'm going to hit F and go and solidify that and bring it out so it's roughly just protruding out the sides, sort of about that far there. Now the next thing I want to do is I kind of want to chamfer off these bottom edges here. So I'm going to jump into edit mode, go into edge select mode, hit Alt Z, and just make sure I select this bottom edge only. Then I'm going to hit F, go to edge bevel, and then just move the mouse and sort of give myself a little bit of a chamfer down the bottom there. That looks good to me. Then I'm just going to hit Tab, go back into object mode. Cool. Well, that is the first detail done. Now I'm going to do something different on the front side here. So let's go to the front view. Again, make sure nothing is selected. Hit F, add in a plane, and make sure it's looking at us. And then I'm going to scale it down so it's sort of roughly sitting in the center here and about this big. Also want to scale it a little bit along the Z axis so it's just a little bit more taller than it is wide. Then hit Control A, apply the rotation and the scale. Jump into edit mode, vertex select mode, go into X-ray view. Just make sure we got these four vertices selected. And I'm going to hit F, vertex bevel, hit W so we can see this better. And I want to just hold down Shift and give it a bit of a vertex bevel. Let's say 40 mils, looks good to me. Hit Enter and jump back into object mode. Now, the next thing I want to do is make sure I change my snap settings from increment to face. Hit G to move this, Y to constrain myself to the Y axis. And then I'm going to sort of hover over this face here and hold down the Control key, which will snap this plane to that face. Now, with that in place there, I'm just going to hit F to solidify this. I'm going to tap W once to set this to a positive and just sort of choose a width. Looks like maybe about 16, looks good. Then we hit W again to go negative, and then hold down the Control key and just add sort of just one notch to the offset here. So it's sitting just outside of the face here. Now with this still selected, I'm going to shift click on this inner plate or this inner object here, hit F and do a difference Boolean cut. Cool, so that looks good. Now I want to repeat this on the other side, but I don't want to repeat all that work. So I'm just going to, while this is still selected, shift click on this inner object again, hit F and this time select mirror. Now I'm using the X axis at the moment, so I want to hit A to make sure I go to the Y axis. Now I can see the object has disappeared, and that's because it's currently sitting on the negative side of the Y axis. So I'm going to hit F to flip that, to bring it back, and also make sure that it shows up on the other side. Now that's looking good to me, so I'm just going to click to confirm, and there we go. Now I'm just going to hide that. I don't need the reference object visible anymore. So as you can see, there's the basic layout or shape of the crate with sort of the major details in place. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time now doing some of the secondary details required for this object. Okay, so I feel like the grid is kind of getting in my way a little bit. So I'm going to hit Alt-V to bring up the viewport menu and then just select Clear View. And that'll just give us a much nicer view of the object here. Okay, so the first detail I want to do is sort of like a bit of a guard or a bumper on this side here. And to sort of show off one of the more recent features of ND, I'm going to select this, open up the sketch menu with Alt-S, and I'm going to select this panel operator. Now I'm just going to select this front face here, and then I'm going to confirm that selection by tapping the spacebar. And then I'm just going to move the mouse so I can start insetting this face. So I'm going to go with something that looks around maybe 15 mils. And then I'm going to hit enter, and then it automatically takes you into solidify mode. I'm going to tap W to go into positive, and I probably don't want this too big, so let's go with 10 mils and hit enter to confirm. So if we take a look at what we've done, we just sort of extracted a bit of a panel from that, as the operator name may have suggested. Now, the next thing I want to do is cut out a couple of grooves. So I'm going to go to the right-hand view, make sure nothing is selected, tap F, add in a plane, set this to view, scale this down a little bit, and scale it again along the Z-axis till it's about maybe this size. Hit G, then Z, bring this down to about here. Then I just want this to be sort of sitting on top of this face. I'm going to hit G to move it, constrain myself to the X-axis in this case, hold down Control while I'm hovering on this face just to place that there. Now with that still selected, I think the next thing we want to do is add some solidification. So I'm going to hit F, select Solidify, and probably go with a value of maybe say 15, and set the weighting to negative, then hold down Control and just set this offset to about maybe 4. So we end up with something that looks like this. So it's sort of protruding in, but not going all the way through. So it's kind of almost at the halfway point. Now, actually, one thing I forgot to do there was to apply the rotation in the scale. So I'm going to do that now quickly. You will notice that this jumped in size a little bit because the scale was off. So I'm going to hit F to recall the solidify operation and maybe bring this down to what looks like maybe 10 mils this time around. Cool, that looks good to me. So the next thing I want to do is to replicate this a few times. So I'm going to open up the main ND menu, go to replicate and select the array cubed operator. Now I want this to go along the Z axis. So I'm going to tap A twice till that's highlighted. And then I'm going to scroll down to replicate this about 4 times and then click to confirm. So we end up with something that looks like that. Let's jump back to the right-hand view here and then hit GZ and just sort of get this centered up a little bit nicer. Okay, and the last thing I want to do is just shift select the main bumper body here, hit F and do a difference cut, and then hit H to hide that. So you can see it just adds that kind of almost like a bumper or guard to the side of the crate here. Now, one last thing, this is obviously just on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is missing. So let's select that. Then I'm going to shift select this object here, hit F, select mirror. Now it looks like this was on the positive side of the X-axis, so that's mirrored across just fine as is. So I'm just going to click to confirm. All right, so the next detail I want to add is a bit of an inset to the top of the crate here. So I'm going to select this part, hit Alt-S to bring up the sketch menu, select panel again, and then just select this top face. Then going to hit space to confirm that, hold down shift so I can be a bit more precise and bring this in. Looks like maybe 8 will work. Let's type in 8 and hit enter. I'm then going to tap W twice to go to negative, and I probably want this to come down, let's say about 8, hold down Control and just put this up a few notches so we make sure it protrudes out the top. Then with this still selected, I'm going to shift click this object here, hit F and perform a difference Boolean. Cool, and then I'm just going to hit H to hide that, and we should have this nice little plate cut out in the top. So the next thing I want to do is sort of add 4 bolts to the top of this crate here. So I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to hit Alt V and unclear the view so I can get the 3D cursor back in the grid. And I'm going to sort of zoom into this corner here. I'm going to hold down Shift and right click to place the 3D cursor roughly in this top right hand corner. Then again with nothing selected, and hit F, and this time I'm going to select Recon Poly. And then in terms of radius here, I think we might go with something like 20. And then in terms of segments, I'm going to hold down Alt and then scroll up to about let's go with 18. Actually, let's make this a little bit more. Let's go 32 perhaps. And then I'm going to click to confirm. So we should have this little nice little circle shape here. Then with that still selected, I'm going to hit F, run a solidify, and bring this up to about maybe 35 millimeters and hit enter. Now I'm going to move the 3D cursor out of the way, hit Shift S and just go cursor to world origin. I just want to focus on this bolt. So the first thing I'm noticing is I don't quite like the position of it. So I'm just going to zoom in, hit G just to move it just out, towards the center a little bit more. So we get roughly a bit more space between the edge here and the bolt itself. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So the next thing I want to do is with that bolt selected, I'm going to hit F and then select bevel. And I think I want to go with probably, let's go 6 and hit enter to confirm. Now I want to add a little bit of a screw head cutout at the top. So I'm going to go to the top view. Then with this bolt selected, hit F and select, actually, sorry, I'm going to hit Alt S to go to the sketch menu and select the screw head operator. And then I'm just going to scroll up. Let's go with this tri-wing option here. Then I'm going to hold down Alt to change the scale and bring this down so it sort of fits within the profile of the bolt here. And then let's just click to confirm. All right, cool. So next thing I want to do is just bring this up and in line with this top face. I'm going to hit G, Z, and then hold down Control and click to snap that to that face. And then let's add some solidification. So F, solidify, and tap W twice to go in a negative direction. Looks like maybe let's go 50 mils. And then in terms of offset, again, just bring it up a notch or two so it protrudes out the top. Then with it still selected, shift select the bolt, hit F and do a difference. And then I'm just going to hide that. So the next thing I want to do is just sort of replicate that in each of the four corners. So believe it or not, the easiest way to do that is just to run a circular array. So what I'm going to do is select my bolt, then shift select this object here, hit F. And if you were to click on circular array as is, you'll notice some rather strange behavior. And the reason for that is the way circular array works is it needs to move the object's origin to the origin point of the thing you're revolving around. Now with procedural geometry, like the geometry that Recon Poly creates, it's quite dependent on the location of the origin point. So it kind of messes up what's going on over here. So I'm going to hit escape just to cancel that. So in order for this to work properly, we kind of need to not touch the origin point in respect to how the geometry is being created. So we've added a special mode to circular array to handle situations like this. So what we're going to do is, again, I'm going to have the bolt selected, shift select on this object here, hit F, and before I click on circular array, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then click on it. Now, as you can see, this begins working the way you'd expect. So I'm going to move this up to a count of 4, and then it'll give us a bolt in each corner. Then I'm just going to click to confirm. Now, what's kind of happening under the hood is we're basically just taking this bolt, moving it down to the origin point, and then using sort of special modifiers to displace it back to its original position, allowing you to sort of do a circular array on procedural geometry, which you would normally not be able to do by simply moving the origin point. I think the next detail I want to do is add a bit of a cut or a seam line on the front of the object here. So I'm going to jump into the front view. Again, make sure nothing is selected, hit F, add in another plane, have a look at us. I'm going to scale this down quite a bit, then scale that along the Z-axis again quite a bit, and then scale it down again along the X-axis only. Now, as you can see, that's just created this sort of really flat, skinny plane in the middle. So with that still selected, I'm going to hit F and then run a solidification and pull this all the way out so it sort of goes right past the edges on both sides. And then I'm going to shift select this main panel here, hit F, and then do a difference. So that ends up creating sort of this cool little seam line you see here on the front. Now with that done, I'm just going to hit H to hide that. Now, one other thing I want to do is if you select this main panel and this hit Shift H to hide everything else, you can see it's sort of got a lot of material still left on it. Whereas I want the part that's in the inside to sort of go all the way through and this to just simply be a panel on the outside of it. So I'm going to hit Alt H just to unhide it, everything again. So I'm going to select this inner part and then shift select this outer panel, hit F, and instead of clicking on difference directly, I'm going to hold down the shift key when I click on it. And now that'll still perform a difference Boolean, but it will keep this original object intact and not touch it. And if you have a look now, we'll select this panel and go shift H to hide everything else again. You can see what I mean. It's now created an actual panel around the outside of the original object instead of this having all this additional geometry or mass to it. I'm going to hit Alt H to unhide that. I'm going to select this panel over here again and just hit H to hide that, get that out of the way. So if you've been following along, if you made it this far, congrats. This is what you have so far. It's looking pretty good. So there are a few more details we want to add to this object. And I think what we'll do next is start by creating the handles on the side. So to create these, the base for the handles on either side, I'm just going to go to the right hand view. And what I want to do is just hold down Shift and right click to set the 3D cursor roughly in the center there. I'm going to hit N to open up the N panel, go down to the view tab and just on the 3D cursor location here, just set the Y to 0. So it's directly in the center there. I'm then going to go to the front view and sort of shift this around just to get a better look at it. And again, with nothing selected, I'm going to hit F and this time just choose single vertex. Then to make things just a little bit easier, I'm going to set my snap mode back to increment. and select absolute grid snap. And I'm just going to hit G, and then I'm just going to hold down Control just to snap it to the nearest grid point, and then just hit E to extrude this out. So it'll come out to about here, and bring it all the way down, and then all the way across again. And then while in edit mode, I'm just going to tap F and select make manifold, which will just complete that shape for us. Now, the next thing I want to do is add, some vertex bevels on these two corners here. So I'm going to select this first vertex down here, hit F, vertex bevel, and give it a width of, let's say, 45, hit enter. I'm just going to close this end panel to get it out the way. Then I'm going to select this top vertex, F, vertex bevel, and this one needs to be just, fairly small. So let's go 15, and that'll do. So the next thing I want to do is just go into the top view, zoom out a little bit, and then Alt Z, make sure I select all of the vertices. Hit Alt Z again to jump out of X-ray mode. I'm going to hit G, and then constrain myself to the Y axis, and then just hold down Control and bring this out to about here. And then I'm going to go back into the front view and tab back into object mode. I'm going to hit G and X and just sort of move this in a little bit, so it's sort of sitting on the front of that face there, and then click to confirm. So if we have a look at what we've got, you should have something that looks roughly like this. So the next step is I'm going to select this, hit F, and run a solidify, and let's go with a thickness of 15. I'm going to tap W twice to go to negative weighting and click to confirm. Now, the next thing I want to do is just mirror this across to the other side. So I'm going to select it, hit F, select mirror. And again, it's sitting on the negative axis here. It's on the correct axis here, which is X, but I'm just going to hit F to flip it, and that'll bring it across to the other side, and click to confirm. Cool, so that's the base done. Let's do the next part. So what I'm going to do is actually, with this selected, just hit Shift D to duplicate it, and right click again to reset the translation. Hit F, and I want to recall the solidify. And then without changing the thickness or anything else, I'm just going to tap W twice to go to positive weighting, and then just click to confirm. Now I'm going to go back into the front view here, tab into edit mode, and just zoom in a little bit. And then I just want to change the size of this a little bit. So I'm going to select these two vertices at the front side of the face here, hit G to move them, and constrain myself to the X axis and bring them in just a bit. I'm going to select the other two here, hit G to move these guys in a little bit as well. I'm then going to select the two on the bottom here, again, hit G and move them up slightly. And I'm just going to select this bottom vertex here, hit F and recall the vertex bevel and adjust the width so that it's sort of protruding out about like this. So let's go with 10 mils and hit enter. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to remove the vertex bevel from this corner here. So I'm going to select that vertex, and I'm going to hit Alt S to bring up the sketch menu, and I'm going to choose clear vertex groups. That'll just reset that one over there. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to select these top two and then hit G and just move them up. So they're about, about this high, sitting just over the top of the crate here. Then with those still selected, I'm going to hit F, do another vertex bevel, set the width quite high, and hold down Alt and set the segment count to something like 12. Cool, with that in place, if we jump back into object mode, let's turn off X-ray, you should have something that looks roughly like that. So I want to add a little bit of a detail sort of cut out to these two handles here. So I want to go to the right-hand view, make sure I have nothing selected, and with the 3D cursor back where it was, hit F, add in a panel, make sure it's looking at us. I'm going to scale this down, and I want the two edges to be roughly in the center of these handles here. I'm going to hit G and move this down so it's sort of sitting about roughly here. And then to avoid any sort of weird behavior, Control A, rotation and scale, make sure that's applied. I then want to sort of have this aligned a bit better. So I'm going to hit G and then constrain myself to the X axis. Actually, before I do that, just make sure we're set to face snap mode. And I hit G, constrain myself to the X axis, and just snap to this face here. So it's sitting in front like that. All right, let's go back to the right-hand view. I'm going to go into edit mode, vertex select, and just select these top two vertices here. Hit F, do a vertex bevel, and bring this in sort of like this. So let's go with a value of 20 and hit enter. We'll jump back into object mode. Then I'm going to hit F, run a solidification. You double tap W, go with a fairly high thickness. We wanted to go all the way through. Then hold down Control and set the offset to something, 12 will do in this case. I'm going to click to confirm. I'm going to shift select these handles here, hit F and run a difference, and then just hide that. So we sort of get that little detail cut out there. All right, the next thing I want to do is actually add the handle itself. So I'm going to go to the front view, I'm going to zoom in to the top here a little bit and then hold down Shift, right click to set the 3D cursor just roughly in the center there. Again, with nothing selected, I'm going to create a recon poly. And let's go to segments and set this up to a value of say 32. And then in terms of radius, let's just make this, looks like maybe, I don't know, let's go with 16 and hit enter to confirm. I then just want to line this up so it looks visually correct. So I'm going to remove this 3D cursor by setting it back to the world origin and hit G to move this and just get it roughly centered up in the middle here. Cool. So the next step is I want to have this snap to this interface here. So I'm going to hit, make sure in face snap mode, hit G, constrain myself to the Y axis and snap that there. And hit F, run a solidify, hit W, so it has a negative weighting, and bring this just past the middle here. Then with that selected, I'm going to shift select this handle, hit F, choose the mirror operator. Looks like it started on the negative side, so I'm going to hit F to flip that, and then click to confirm, and that'll create a handle that bridges across these two handles quite nicely and exactly as well. Awesome, so that's looking pretty good to me. I want to add one last detail on the handles, sort of on the outside face here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this handle, hit Shift D to duplicate it, right click to reset the translation, and hit F to recall the solidify. I'm going to tap W to go to a negative weighting. Yep, negative, and then click to confirm. I'm going to go to the front view here. I'm going to jump back into edit mode. I'm going to select all these vertices and then just scale this down a little bit. And I'm also going to scale it along the X axis, again, just a little bit further. And I'm going to select just these bottom two vertices here and move them up sort of to about here. And then I'm going to select this bottom vertex again, hit F, recall the vertex bevel and add a bit more of an exaggerated bevel there. And click to confirm and jump back into object mode. And you can see we sort of have that there. Now it's looking a little bit too thick. So I'm going to hit F, recall the solidify, and maybe bring this down to say, let's go 5 mils and hit enter. So that's a nice little additional detail on the outside edges there. All right, actually one last thing I want to do is add a bit of a bolt that goes through here as a bit of a pivot point. So I'm going to go back to the front view here. Let's zoom in, shift right click to set the 3D cursor. Make sure nothing is selected. Hit F and add in a recon poly. Let's set the segment count up to about 32 again. And then the radius, I'm just going to hold down shift while I adjust this. And it looks like maybe let's go to 12 and hit enter. Cool. Now the next thing I want to do is just going to go to the right hand side here. With that still selected, I'm going to hit F, go to solidify and hit W to make this negative weighted. Now I'm going to set the thickness to 35 and then holding down control, let's just move this offset so it's about kind of equally distant either side and then click to confirm. Cool. And then one last thing, just add a little bit more detail to this. I'm going to hit F and just run a bevel, hold down shift and maybe let's go with a value of 3 and then hit enter. Cool, so that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do is just mirror that across to the other side. So I'm going to select this little bolt. I'm going to shift click on the handles, hit F and run a mirror and then tap F again just to flip it. So it goes from the negative side to the positive side and click to confirm. So let's get this 3D cursor out the way. And there you go. That looks like a pretty convincing handle to me. So unfortunately, it's only on one side at the moment. We wanted to go over to the other side as well. So let's just begin mirroring everything across to the other side. So let's start with these brackets down here. So I'm going to click on this, shift click on the main body, hit F and run a mirror. Now that looks like that's, correctly set up as is. So I'm going to click to confirm and then basically just repeat the process for all of them. Cool. So once you've done that, you should have your handles on either side. All right. So a couple of additional details I want to add is just some panel cutouts on the front and the backhand side here. So let's select this main body here, hit Alt S to bring up the sketch menu and select panel. Now I'm going to select these faces on this side, rotate around, select these faces as well. And with those faces selected, I'm going to hit space to confirm and then basically inset these just a bit, click to confirm and hit W to set the weighting to positive and maybe set this to about 8 and hit enter. So that'll add some additional panel details to the outside. Actually, on second thought, let's actually do a cutout with these. So I'm going to select these panels again, hit F, go to solidify, change the weighting from positive to negative, then hold down control add one little notch to the offset, and then click to confirm. I'm going to shift click on this main body here, hit F and choose difference, and then just hide that for a second. So I think that actually looks better than the panel sitting on the outside there. All right, well, let's just repeat that to the other side. So I'm going to just click on that, hit F, choose cycle, go down to this, click to confirm, so we have that selected. I'm then going to shift click on the main body, hit F and run a mirror, and then click to confirm, and then just hide that again. Okay, so we're pretty much on the home stretch now. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup and some additional details, and then I think we're ready to start texturing this thing and setting up a bit of a scene. So just to see things a little bit nicer, I'm just going to hit Alt-V and clear the view so I can admire what we've done. And I think the first thing we want to do is we currently have a lot of harsh edges going on with this geometry. So I'm going to start by just selecting anything, hit F and select weighted normal bevel. Now the default value of 1 for the width is going to be more than enough for what we want to do. So I'm going to click to confirm. So the weighted normal just makes these edges look a little bit more realistic and helps to catch the light a lot better when you're rendering this out. So I'm just going to go through and literally repeat this process across all the different parts, and we'll come back to this in a second. Cool. So that is looking pretty good to me. So at this point, I think we're ready to start adding some texture to this thing. So before we continue, I just wanted to give a big shout out to a quad tier Patreon member of ours, Another Human. Thank you for your support. And also a big shout out to anyone that's donated money via Gumroad. If you too would like to support the ongoing development of the ND Blender add-on, or just to support what we do here on this YouTube channel, you can become a patron. We have 2 tiers, triangle and quad. Or if you just want to make a sort of once-off donation, you can select or type in any value you want when you download the add-on from Gumroad. All the support is really appreciated and really helps us do what we do. Okay, well, let's start adding some materials to this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lay down a ground plane. So let's hit F, add plane, and just scale this up quite a bit. And I'm just going to look at this from the bottom, hit G, Z, and just make sure bring it all the way down so the crate is sort of sitting right on the floor. Nice. Now I'm just going to jump into rendered view for a second. And I currently have Eevee selected, and we will be doing the materials in Eevee and rendering this out in Eevee, but you can render this out in cycles if you wish. Nothing will really change too much. So the very first thing I want to do is just come down to the world properties here and change this surface from color to environment texture. And then I'm just going to hit open. I'm going to jump down to my HDRIs folder and just choose this abandoned slipway HDRI. So that'll just add some sort of base world lighting to the scene. Just makes it look a little bit better. So the first thing I want to add some color to is just this main inner body part here. So I'm going to select this, come down to the materials tab, hit new, give this a name of body. And I want to set the base color to sort of a dark, almost black. And then I want to set the metallic value all the way up to 1. Actually, this might be a little bit too dark, so we're going to bring this up a little bit. Something about here. I think that looks good. And then also want to set the roughness, or bring it down a little bit so it has a little bit of reflectivity to it. All right, the next thing I want to do is add some color to this outer panel section. So I'm going to add a new material to that. And we're just going to call this panels. I want this to be metallic as well. And then the base color is going to be sort of almost like an army green, I suppose. Let's go with that. I think that looks pretty cool. Then I'm going to select the sort of the base of these handles here. I want to actually set this to the same color as the panels, and the same thing with the upright parts of the handles here. Then the next thing I want to do is sort of create sort of like almost like a rubbery look to these bumpers on the side here. So I'm going to select this very first one, hit new. I'm going to call this bumper, and then I'm going to set the base color to sort of like a grayish looking thing like this, and then come down to the roughness and just sort of set this up just a little bit. So it'll probably give the effect of sort of either rubber or hard plastic on the sides here. And this extra detail as well, we'll just have the same material as the bumper itself. All right, I think the next things we'll do is these bolts. So let's select those, add a new material, and give it name of bolts. Set metallic all the way up to 1, and then this base color, we just want to bring it down a little bit, so not quite black, just a little bit lighter than this main body material we have here, so sort of this like light gray sort of color. And then with those selected, I want to make these guys a little bit more reflective, so I'm going to bring the roughness down just a bit as well. So just to help sort of catch that light a little bit more. I think that looks pretty cool. And then these little bolts on the side here, I think we'll do the same thing with those. So I'm just going to select bolts from the material list. Now the sides of the handle can probably be the same as the bumpers. So I'm going to select bumper for that. And then the handle itself, we're just going to add a new material, and I'm just going to call this rubber. And the base color for that, again, will just be sort of like a dark black, even though that makes no sense at all, dark black, it's just really black. And then I want to set the roughness up a bit. So there's a little bit of reflectivity, but not too much. Cool, so you should have something that looks like this. Now, I just had a thought. I actually want to create another additional detail on this crate. So before we continue setting colors on this thing, I'm just going to jump back into the solid view here. And then I'm going to zoom in and sort of select this outer panel. I'm going to hit Alt-S to bring up the sketch menu and select panel. And what I want to do is sort of select this outer set of faces here. So this one coming across, and I'm just going to work my way all the way around. And I just want to repeat the process on the top side here. Cool, now with all of that selected, I'm just going to hit space to confirm and then just make this slightly inset. Looks like about a value of 7. Click to confirm, hit W, set this to positive weighting, and then just bring this out just enough, like maybe 3 mils will do the trick. Cool, and I think what I want to do with that is we just jump back into the rendered view, is with that selected, I'm going to just remove this material, the panels, and add a new material and just call this lights. Now with that in place, I want to go down to the emission here, set the emission strength, I don't know, let's try 5 for now, and set the emission color to sort of a green that sort of matches the body. Now you won't see anything at first, but if we jump over to the sort of scene settings here, for the render engine set to Eevee, let's turn on bloom, and I'll just add some sort of nice light details to the Sci-Fi crate, making it look a little bit more sci-fi. Awesome, so the floor is looking a bit boring, so I'm going to select that, go to the materials and add a floor. And then I just want the base color to be fairly dark. So let's go all the way down here. And let's set the specular, just bring that down a bit. And probably the roughness is bring that down a bit too. So we get a little bit of additional reflection on the floor there. Cool, so that is looking pretty good. So I think one thing I want to do is create a couple of duplicates and just sort of lay them out in a bit of a scene. So the way I'm going to do that is, this is the ground plane here. I'm just going to hide this for a second. Make sure I have my, whatever collections you have set up, that's fine. I'm just going to create a new one and I'm just going to call this crate. I'm going to select all these objects we've created and sort of drag them and bring them into this crate collection and make sure everything goes in there. Cool, with that done, I'm just going to unhide the floor. And then what I'm going to do is hit Shift A and add in a collection instance of the crate itself. Then hit G and then Shift Z so it only moves along the X and Y plane. Let's move it out to the back here somewhere. Maybe hit R, rotate around the Z axis and sort of, I don't know, just change the rotation a bit so it looks like that. That looks pretty good. And hit Shift A again, collection instance, create another version of the crate, G, Shift Z, move this along to here. And let's just go to the front view, hit R to rotate this and sort of lay it down a little bit on the floor like that. And then come back to this view here. Now I want to just G, Shift Z, move this around again, R, Z, and rotate this out a little bit like that, just to set up a little bit of a scene. Cool. Now, if you wanted to add some additional lighting, you can select, say, this object here, hit Alt-T to bring up the Utils menu. Then we're going to select Flare Lighting. Now, Flare Lighting is completely procedural, so if you keep tapping the R key, we'll get all sorts of different lighting setups. So I'm just going to spend maybe a couple minutes here quickly and just try and find a lighting setup that I like the look of. All right, so I found one here that I quite like the look of. I mean, it's completely up to you. You just spend the time to find, a lighting setup that works for you. And even material colors and emission colors can be changed quite easily. Cool. So, I mean, this is not really a tutorial on rendering and setting up anything more than this. It's more of a demonstration of non-destructive modeling and creating the Sci-Fi crate. So, yeah. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. And if you have any cool renders from this tutorial, please share it with me on Discord. I'd love to see what you guys do. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button. And again, join us on Discord. We've got some pretty cool people in there. And we have some good discussions around everything ND and just Blender in general. It's a good place to hang out. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you'd like to see more content like this, I know this is a little bit of a longer tutorial, but it's quite fun making these, and hopefully it's a good demonstration of sort of the power of non-destructive modeling in Blender itself. So have fun and happy modeling.